NBC and CNN refuse to air my victory speech, then frankly, they should have their licenses or whatever they have taken away.
The New York Times is one of the most dishonest of all. Wait till you see what I'm going to do with them. You're going to have so much fun. ABC took a big hit last night. I mean, to be honest, they're a news organization. They have to be licensed.
Now, the media has long been a bugbear for Donald Trump, but he has now escalated the stakes. He says that if he comes back to power, he's going to prosecute the media, or at least the media that has been critical of him. Are you worried that if Trump comes to power, he's going to come after the media in the way that we are seeing in other countries, including you and others? You think so?
Well, as for me, the Trump people have openly called me out by name and threatened me.
Yeah.
One guy who wants to be Trump's Attorney General, Mike Davis, tweeted that once I'm Attorney General, the first thing I will do is send Mehdi Hasan to Guantanamo Bay. This is the stuff they say openly.
For the first time in 36 years, the Washington Post will not endorse a presidential candidate this election.
Obviously, what in fact happened in both cases was the editorial boards, which are liberal, wrote up an endorsement of Kamala Harris and sent it to the owner. And the owner looked at it for a while and said, this is too much trouble.
Trump has said if he comes back to power, he's going to go after some of these news outlets like New York Times and
he
so
should.
on.
And he should.
It's typical authoritarian playbook, actually. This control the press, can control the narrative. We know that he would dismantle the press.
This is the final report of our three-part series on the American elections, and this airs on Election Day in America, a very consequential moment. What many believe is a make or break, not just for American democracy, but also, and this is the focus of this episode, a make or break for the American media. Now, the media has long been a bugbear for Donald Trump.
A few days ago, I called the fake news the enemy of the people, and they are. They are the enemy of the people.
But he has now escalated the stakes. He says that if he comes back to power, he's going to prosecute the media, or at least the media that has been critical of him.
The New York Times is one of the most dishonest of all. Wait till you see what I'm going to do with them. You're going to have so much fun.
Could this be a make or break moment for America's press freedoms?
Election night coverage begins Tuesday at 6 on MSNBC.
In America's TV newsrooms, business as usual as they hype their Election Day coverage.
We can now make a major projection.
The way only CNN can bring it to you. Election night in America.
It's been an election like no other.
This, though, is no ordinary election. Trump has said he will punish the news media that he thinks were critical of him or platformed his rivals. Trump threatened ABC the day after the network hosted his debate with Kamala Harris, a debate which most agreed Trump had lost.
ABC took a big hit last night. I mean, to be honest, they're a news organization. They have to be licensed to do it. They ought to take away their license for the way they did that.
He made a similar threat against CNN and NBC after they did not air a speech he made on his path to becoming his party's presidential candidate.
NBC and CNN refuse to air my victory speech, then frankly, they should have their licenses or whatever they have taken away.
After CBS's show 60 Minutes aired an interview of Kamala Harris which Trump alleged was edited in her favor, he warned of reprisals.
Now, what we're doing is we're going to subpoena their records. No, I think 60 Minutes, I think it should be taken off the air, frankly.
Sewell Chan is a journalist and editor of the Columbia Journalism Review. He says threats to the US media are not new, but Trump has taken it to unprecedented levels.
Now, every president, Democrat, Republican, going back to FDR and radio or JFK and television, of course, has tried to use and Reagan has tried to use the press to their advantage, to use their bully pulpit. But I don't think we've ever seen so concerted an attack on the press as an institution.
Some say Trump's threats to the media are just bluster. The media survived 4 years of Trump in the White House, goes the argument. Ramesh Ponnuru is the editor of the National Review, a conservative journal.
It is true on the other side that when he was president, Trump was a lot of talk and no action. He didn't change the libel laws. He didn't try to change the libel laws.
Trump, as president, may not have changed libel laws, but the Trump administration blocked Amazon's $10 billion cloud computing contract with the Pentagon, widely seen at the time as Trump settling scores with Jeff Bezos over reporting by the Washington Post. Bezos is the owner of the Post and Amazon. Other attempts were less successful, like pressuring government officials to increase delivery fees on Amazon. He attempted to settle scores with CNN by trying to get the government to block AT&T's acquisition of Time Warner, the parent company of CNN. If Trump didn't fully succeed, it's in part because those around him urged restraint. They have since been replaced.
Let's be clear, a lot of the executives who own media organizations in this country like less regulation.
Mehdi Hasan, star anchor, fierce critic of Trump, tells me there's nothing now to hold Trump back.
Are you worried that if Trump comes to power, he's going to come after the media in the way that we are seeing in other countries, including you and others? You think so?
Well, as for me, the Trump people have openly called me out by name and threatened me.
Yeah.
One guy who wants to be Trump's Attorney General, Mike Davis, tweeted that once I'm Attorney General, the first thing I will do is send Mehdi Hasan to Guantanamo Bay. Like, this is the stuff they say openly.
Trump's playbook is less likely to witness the jailing of journalists, says Chan. Instead, he could follow a pattern seen in India and elsewhere of strongman leaders using government agencies to penalize the media.
If you're asking me, do I think that Donald Trump can imprison journalists based on what they're reporting in the next 4 years? We have a pretty strong First Amendment, so I hope that's not the case. But between here and imprisonment are a lot of in-betweens. Yeah. And I think you saw A.G. Sulzberger's recent column about illiberal practices overseas, using the tax code to say, oh, you didn't pay your taxes properly. Or there was a BBC office, if I'm not mistaken, that was in India that was raided.
Yes.
And maybe the journalist's contact information was then in the hands of the authority. Yeah. There are in many countries saying you have to have registration requirements. Oh, you're foreign media? You have to register. You can't get foreign funding. That's happening in countries in Europe, in Russia. And so there are many techniques that can be used. In a way, censorship, crossing the words out and imprisoning the journalists, that's like the old way.
Yes.
The new ways are more subtle, are more sophisticated.
Go after the businesses. Put pressure, squeeze pressure,
threaten to take away broadcast licenses. So there is an arsenal of tools in the toolbox.
Even before he can use those tools, Trump's bullying has already had a chilling effect on some in the media.
But fascism is creeping, right? And don't forget, Tim Snyder, the very famous historian of fascism at Yale, he has a phrase. He says, what people do when autocracy is coming is they obey in advance.
Right.
And we are seeing that now with media organizations who are reaching out to the Trump campaign, who are trying to get more Trump people on, who are basically self-censoring because they don't want to upset Trump, because they think he might win, and they think, keep our heads down. He won't come for us if we keep our heads down. That is obeying in advance. That's how the fascist wins. When the media, which is supposed to be independent, adversarial, says, we'd rather keep our heads down and have a quiet time.
Two moments in this election cycle starkly illustrated the American media's attempt to placate Trump and the backlash to such obedience. CNN found itself at the eye of the storm when an extreme MAGA supporter it had invited on one of its panels appeared to link Mehdi, who was on the same panel, to Hezbollah.
No, by me. I never called you an anti-Semite. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying
I'm a supporter of the Palestinians. I'm used to it.
Yeah, I hope your beeper doesn't go off. The thing is
did
that
you just say I should die?
You should not.
No,
did you just say I should be killed?
No, I did not say that. No, I did not say that.
Hold on.
Did your guest just say I should be killed on live TV?
I said I hope you're.
Let me just stop.
You said you hope my beeper doesn't go off.
Because you said I'm a big supporter.
As you may have seen, Ryan was asked to leave the show, and we have put out a statement saying that he's not welcome back on our air.
Okay, now imagine Ryan saying this on your regular Indian news channel. Would the penalty be A, a ban, B, advertisers boycotting in protest, or C, the anchor taking him to task? Or is the answer D, which is none of the above? Instead, he goes on to become a career talking head who's always given a platform, and the advertising money just keeps pouring in. There's no good answer within the legacy news model. It's why we're doing something new, where there are no ads, no sponsors, just subscribers who pay for journalism in public interest. If you're not a subscriber yet, scan the QR code on your screen or log on to thenewsminute.com/subscription. With just 2 clicks, you can change the future of news.
For the first time in 36 years, the Washington Post will not endorse a presidential candidate this election.
The Washington Post found itself battling an even greater crisis after it decided not to endorse a presidential candidate, breaking with a decades-long tradition, a few days after the LA Times announced a similar decision. According to reports, both newspapers were planning to endorse Kamala Harris. The Post and the Times separately claimed the decision was not made under pressure. No one was convinced. Marty Baron, the former editor of the Post, posted on X, "This is cowardice with democracy as its casualty. Trump will see this as an invitation to further intimidate Jeff Bezos and others." Ben Smith is the founder of Semaphore, a digital news site which reports on the US media.
I mean, it's basically they both decided in the span of 4 days, 2 weeks before the election, that they have rediscovered ancient policies from the 20th century that say that they should not endorse. And on these, they've dusted off these old tablets and realized that there's an ancient policy that says endorsements are bad, that they have been in breach of for the last 20 or 50 years, but it's an appropriate time to go back to them, which is a absurd explanation. Obviously, what in fact happened in both cases was the editorial boards, which are liberal, wrote up an endorsement of Kamala Harris and sent it to the owner. And the owner looked at it for a while and said, this is too much trouble.
Self-censorship by media owners wanting to avoid trouble might be par for the course in India.
But for US voters, any threat to press freedom ought to be a big red flag for a country that fiercely defends the right of free speech. But go by the polls, and at least 50%, half of America, seems to be behind Trump. They either have no problems with his threats to settle scores with the media, some might even be cheering it on.
In a polarized America, believers in the free press are likely to be Democrat supporters, like Jim, who we met at a Kamala Harris rally.
It's typical authoritarian playbook, actually. This control the press, can control the narrative, and anybody who he thought would be liberal or against his policies or against would be subject, I think, to who knows. I mean, we certainly hope it wouldn't include jailing the freedom of the press is necessary for democracy. We know that he would dismantle the press.
The worries of dismantling the press doesn't seem to matter to roughly half of the America that backs Trump. People like Sabrina, who we met in a Trump rally, has no problem with Trump's threats to go after the media.
Trump has said if he comes back to power, he's going to go after some of these news outlets like New York Times and so on.
And he should. They're publishing lies. They were putting criminal things out there that he didn't do. They lied.
That extreme view aside, it has been argued for a while now that the growing lack of trust in the media, especially the liberal press, is partly its own fault. That by only addressing an elitist echo chamber, the media has lost credibility amongst ordinary Americans, creating a vacuum which someone like Trump could exploit.
There was always a sense that these liberal journalists, especially at the top publications networks, look down on normal conservative voters and don't respect them, think they're dumb, think they're easily led.
Well, Sreenivasan, I think there's some fairness to that. Now, I just came to Columbia Journalism School recently, and previously for 3 years, I ran a nonprofit newsroom in Texas, a very conservative state, a very Republican state. And I talked with and became friendly with and got to know many, many people who are much more conservative on average than people I knew in California, New York, and D.C.
Is it possible to share examples of the kind of coverage you were doing there, the sort of lens or the kind of stories which would not be on the radar of, let's say, the big...
Oh, I could name so many.
City or the big media or the big...
We covered economic development.
Right.
We covered rural health care and the disappearance of clinics and specialty care, especially for lower income women. We covered transportation and aging infrastructure. We tried to cover a lot of quality of life issues that matter for ordinary people. Otherwise, I fear this is what's happened in America. People turn on Fox News or MSN and everything's about Congress or the president. So yes, we are partly responsible for that problem, but tearing us down is not going to fix it.
This is true. Tearing down all of the US media may not be the solution. An elitist or a Washington-centric bias is only one part of why the US media has a credibility problem. There are others. like the far from perfect coverage of US foreign policy. The lopsided reporting of the Gaza war is the most recent example. But a big reason why the US media stands discredited is because of Trump himself, with his relentless attacks on so-called fake news. This was him at a recent rally in Arizona that we attended.
Wow, that's a lot of fake news back there. That's a lot of fake news. Holy mackerel. Look at those red lights go off, because they don't want me to call them corrupt and horrible people.
Real news. Trump's targeting of the media has been amplified by the media itself, America's right-wing news ecosystem, with Fox News as its centerpiece.
I have some bad news for the Biden Democrats at fake news CNN.
The liberal media is desperately trying to sweep the attempted assassination of Trump under the rug.
Fox News, which is the most powerful television network in America, was created as an attack on the rest of the liberal media, sort of presents itself as an alternative news organization, but doesn't really do much news gathering. It is mostly does media criticism from the right.
Fox's mandate to target the liberal media predates Trump. I asked Ramesh Ponnuru, how wise is it for Fox to back a politician who's not just vilifying the media, but is now threatening to use the law against them? Doesn't Trump pose a threat to Fox's own freedoms?
He has been sharply critical, even of Fox News, for even interviewing Democratic spokesmen who criticized Trump. And I think he has used phrases like they shouldn't be allowed to do that. So I think there is a very real threat. But at the same time, Fox News is extremely worried that if they are at odds with Trump, Trump will turn his supporters away from Fox. That's one of the reasons Fox conducted itself so disgracefully after the 2020 election. Plenty of people at Fox knew that Trump had lost the 2020 election, but they were losing market share to other right-wing organizations to the extent that they told the truth. And they knew it, and that's why they were catering to the lie.
Catering to Trump's lie about the stolen election came at a price. Fox was sued and had to pay out close to $800 million to settle. Despite that, they remain strong backers of Trump, regardless of the risks. Because, as Ramesh pointed out, Trump has no shortage of choices where he can take his message. He could turn up at the more extreme Fox spin-off Newsmax.
I think that 60 Minutes should go off the air. They should take that license away from CBS.
Or the platform set up by ex-Fox anchor Tucker Carlson.
Are you worried that they're going to try and kill you? Why wouldn't they try and kill you, honestly? Do you spend a lot of your career in television? Do you think television is declining? How do you keep the agencies under control? How do you keep FBI and CIA specifically under control?
Or as we saw in this election cycle, Trump sought out America's growing tribe of right-leaning dude bro podcasters, where he gets to play the nice guy.
Barron is 18, he's handsome, he's tall, he's rich.
He's got the whole ball.
He's unleashed in New York City. Are you sure you want to reverse Roe v. Wade now?
I'm good with names, you know. Tim, it's hard to say. How are we doing so far?
Oh, you're doing great.
You're doing amazing.
So
they're making us wrap up. We want you for long.
Sounds familiar?
I feel like Virat Kohli and yourself are the faces of young India. Are you a grizzly bear mom? Not grizzly bear moms?
I don't know.
आपका कोई बेस्ट फ्रेंड है नरेंद्र मोदी का कोई बेस्ट फ्रेंड है BFF
पर्स रखते हैं क्या बटुआ जिसके अंदर पैसे होते हैं
Trump's rise has increased the parallels with the Indian media landscape. Threats of government action against media that asks tough questions. Media owners opting for self-censorship. A thriving Godi media that offers a safe space to an authoritarian leader even as it attacks his critics.
Well, I've had a lot of people helping. A couple of people from Fox, actually, I shouldn't say that, but they wrote some jokes, and for the most part, I didn't like any of them.
Yet, the American media, for now, has more protections than we do. A Trump victory, however, will test those protections and will only close the already narrowing gap between them and us, not in the best possible way.